The truth stands unafraid of any trial, but those who build their lives on lies always tremble when asked to prove themselves. Imagine this, chosen one. You find yourself in a courtroom, not because of anything you've done, but simply because your light was too much for someone to handle. There's no evidence, no fingerprints, no real crime, just rumors parading as facts, repeated so loudly that the crowd mistook noise for reality. The saddest part? People believed the accusations, not because they were true, but because they were shouted from every corner. That's exactly what they tried to do to you. When they found nothing real to hold against you, they started stacking lie upon lie, hoping to build a prison out of falsehoods and trap your name inside. But what they never realized is that lies decay quickly, while truth is immortal. It simply waits patiently in the silence. Here's something that'll send chills down your spine. Psychologists say that when someone can't handle your energy, they'll try to rewrite your story just to feel like they're in control. Most smear campaigns aren't rooted in truth. They're driven by envy, because you reflect something their egos can't touch. You move through life with grace, you speak with clarity, and you never begged for a spotlight. It followed you naturally, and that drove them mad. Their attacks weren't random gossip. This was a coordinated strike, a desperate ploy to tarnish your name without a single piece of evidence to support their story. Now, as the lies begin to rot, they can't prove a single accusation, not one. And for that, chosen one, I thank you. Don't forget to share this message by liking and subscribing, not just for yourself, but to help spread this truth to more people. Our shared purpose is to shine light in places where others have tried to keep it dark. Thank you for being a vital part of this mission, because whether your critics like it or not, you are part of a force they can never stop. Let's look deeper. From the very beginning, this was never about facts. It was always about fear. Your very presence challenged their carefully built illusions. You showed up and reminded them of everything they pretended to be for years. That calm confidence, that emotional intelligence, that ability to walk into any space and make people feel seen just by being yourself. It infuriated them. Not because you ever harmed them, but because you lived authentically, never needing their approval. So, instead of doing the inner work, they panicked and chose the coward's route. Tear down what they could never become. They circled up, picking at your past, twisting your words, screenshotting your silence, desperately hoping to find some dirt. But despite all their efforts, they couldn't uncover a single undeniable truth about you. And that's what's tormenting them now. Because there's only one thing more dangerous than a lie that gets exposed while its target continues to rise. That's the humiliation your enemies now face. The same people who used to whisper about you are now whispering about them. The spotlight is shifting. Even gossip needs receipts, and your enemies arrived at this war with empty hands. This is more than just survival. It's about reclaiming your narrative. When you're falsely accused and you keep standing tall, you don't just clear your name. You elevate your spirit. You prove what they never expected, that your silence was never weakness. It was strategy. It was strength. You didn't defend yourself because you were guilty. You let their own lies unravel. And now, that silence is louder than any accusation they ever hurled at you. The universe saw it all. The false witnesses, the staged drama, the jealousy hidden behind every so-called concern. Now, with the dust settling, not a single one of them can step forward with any real evidence. No screenshots, no messages, no moments, because none of it was ever real. It was all fiction, a performance that fell flat in the end. If you're listening now, wondering why people turned on you so quickly, why they believed strangers over your soul, remember this. People don't need proof to judge you. They just need permission. Your enemies gave them that permission, hoping never to get caught. But they did. And now the same mouths that lied about you have gone silent. And that silence screams guilt. So stay grounded, chosen one. Don't lower yourself to throw dirt at those who tried to bury you. Let truth do what it does best. Outlive every lie. Today, we put the spotlight where it belongs. Not on their noise, but on your name. Not because you're perfect, but because you're proven. The truth just won. If you felt that quiet knowing, that deep, "I told you I was innocent" energy, then this message was meant for you. Drop an 88 in the comments if you know they played dirty but couldn't win, because the truth stayed by your side. And if you feel called, support the movement behind this message. Exposing lies and protecting the light takes real work, real energy, and real chosen ones like you. Every bit of support helps this mission awaken even more souls. They tried to silence the truth, but now it's our turn to walk through this, piece by piece. Because if you truly are who we believe you are, you won't just hear this message in your ears, you'll feel it in your bones. Let's dive in. They tried to burn your name with lies, hoping the smoke would cover up their own mess. But fire can't destroy gold. It only proves what's real. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate attack on your character, packaged as concern. They didn't stumble into their stories. They crafted them, desperate to control how others saw you instead of fixing themselves. Behind closed doors, empty hearts made you the villain of a crime that never happened. No witnesses, no proof, just accusations and envy. They exaggerated every detail, twisted every strength, and labeled your silence as guilt because they had nothing solid, only their own insecurity to project. That's not exposing your darkness, that's exposing their own. Psychologists call it narcissistic inversion. They couldn't face their flaws, so they tried to hang them on you. People believed it because it's easier to join the whisper than challenge the lie. But now the cracks in their story are showing. There's no consistency, no receipts, just bitterness. You didn't fight back because you knew your silence would speak louder. Their accusations were built like a house of cards, and now truth is breathing down their necks. When the smoke clears, your truth stands unshaken while their lies collapse. Remember, nobody bothers to lie about someone who doesn't matter. They only attack what threatens them, and you reminded them of everything they could never fake: authenticity and real energy. They used doubt as a weapon, but never brought proof because none existed. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Mud doesn't stick to gold. Now, as their story falls apart, they're the ones scrambling to explain. Let them stutter and sweat when asked for evidence, because you're not the criminal. You're the proof that resilience and peace can't be smeared. Let their hate clarify your purpose. When people try to bring up the rumors, just ask for the proof, and watch how silent the room gets. They used feelings like fingerprints, but never had a real crime. When emotions become evidence, the innocent are always at risk, and the loudest liar acts as judge. They accused you not with facts, but with buried envy and resentment. It wasn't logic. It was insecurity pretending to be truth. They didn't bring proof. They brought drama. You were calm and confident, and that triggered people who thrive on chaos. Your quiet presence unsettled them, not because of anything you did, but because you reflected what they tried to hide. Instead of dealing with their own discomfort, they projected it onto you, turning whispers and vague suspicions into gossip. When asked for real evidence, they could never deliver, just shifting stories and empty feelings. People who can't control you try to control your reputation. They mistook your boundaries for arrogance and your peace for plotting. The truth is, they hated you not for what you did, but for what you didn't need from them: attention or approval. They replaced facts with feelings because emotion spreads faster than logic, and most people would rather belong than verify. But feelings fade, and eventually, people start asking for real proof. When that happens, the story falls apart. There are no details, just old egos and empty claims. And while their drama rotted, you kept rising because the truth always outlasts emotional hype. Your silence was never surrender. It was a trap for their lies. Now, as their guilt sets in, they can't defend the stories they made up. You didn't just survive their attacks, you outlasted the illusion. Hold your head high, chosen one. You never owed explanations to those who replaced facts with fiction, and you'll never need to carry the weight of their fear. They have no proof because it never existed. All they had was insecurity, and you were simply the mirror that made it visible. They called you arrogant simply because you survived the fire they set for you. Nothing haunts the guilty more than the silent strength of someone they tried to destroy, but failed. Chosen one, you didn't need to fight back or make a scene. Your calm, your quiet resilience spoke louder than any defense. That peace acted as a mirror. When they looked at you, they saw all the things in themselves they tried to bury. Your healing triggered them, not because you chased revenge, but because you moved on without bitterness. That's what they couldn't handle. If the roles were reversed, they wouldn't have survived what you did. And deep down, they know it. That's why they twisted the narrative and tried to paint you as the problem. You stopped playing along with dysfunction and they called it arrogance. You set boundaries and they called it pride. But the truth is, you didn't change for attention. You changed to protect your own spirit. Your survival, your happiness, and your growth after betrayal became living proof of their failure. Some people resent your healing because it reminds them of what they're avoiding in themselves. The fact that you're still here, thriving, is the karma they never saw coming. And it's a guilt they'll carry long after you've moved on. They tried to turn you into a case study, but all they discovered was unbreakable truth. They investigated your life like you were guilty of something, but your only offense was surviving with a level of grace their bitterness couldn't handle. Chosen one, they didn't just watch. They surveilled you, obsessed with your calm because it disrupted their chaos. Every move you made, every silence you held, they analyzed and waited for you to fail. Your life became a courtroom with no real charge, just pressure meant to make you crack. But every time they searched for a mask to slip, they saw you were never pretending, you were just real, and that authenticity rattled them. They watched and waited for you to break, but all they found was consistency and strength. It left them powerless. How could you still have peace after all you'd faced? The answer: they showed up late to a battle you'd already survived. Your silence wasn't weakness. It was your sharpest strength. When the storm came, you didn't flinch, and because they couldn't find any dirt, they tried to invent it. Your calm unsettled them, your privacy made them suspicious, but in truth, your realness exposed their fakeness without a word. You were the mirror they never wanted to face, not for what you revealed, but for what they lacked. So remember, when someone is watching you a little too closely, it's not curiosity. It's fear disguised, because fear always tries to study what it can't destroy. They built a hype train out of lies and ended up getting run over by the truth. They didn't want facts. They wanted a story that could drown yours out. Chosen one, they didn't create a case. They created a circus, making you the main event. Not because you asked for it, but because your presence was too powerful for those addicted to chaos. Their mission was never to investigate, but to erase you, using nothing but rumors, side glances, and one emotional accusation that spread like wildfire. Instead of seeking truth, they built a crowd that wanted drama, turning one grudge into gospel and one misquote into a headline. Gossip became groupthink, and comfort took priority over honesty, because facing your growth and peace was harder than believing a lie. Suddenly, people you barely knew acted like they knew your whole story, repeating hearsay until you became the star of a fiction you never signed up for. No one was looking for evidence, they were just amplifying emotions, loud enough to drown out reality. People believed it because the easiest lie to accept is the one that justifies jealousy. In a world hungry for drama, facts become irrelevant, until the lie starts to fall apart. But while their story lost steam, you kept living with quiet strength, rising above the noise. Now, as cracks appear, people are finally asking, what did they actually do? and no one has an answer because there never was one. Their circus was built on nothing but truth, like you, remains standing when the drama dies down. They feared your blueprint, not just the building. You were a threat before you ever stepped into your power. Some people try to stop you early, not because of your past, but because of what you're destined to become. Chosen one, they weren't threatened by your history, but by your potential. Your presence hinted at a future that made them uneasy, not because you bragged, but because you carried your promise so naturally and silently that it spoke for itself. They sensed your strength before you even realized it yourself. Your aura changed the atmosphere. Your quiet confidence demanded respect, and people paid attention to you even when you didn't try. That's why they tried to clip your wings before you could fly, because even at your lowest, you radiated the promise of something bigger. Picture it. You're just a seed, barely breaking through the ground, but already people are trying to block your light. It wasn't about what you had done. It was the fear of who you could become. They had no issue with you struggling. They even cheered for you as long as you stayed small. But the second you started to grow, to step into your purpose, the sabotage began. Their whispers about your confidence and change weren't really about you. They were about their own fear of being left behind. They tried to shrink you because your evolution reminded them of their own stagnation. Remember this, they didn't fight the old you, they tried to stop the future you. Just by existing, you were already too much for them to handle. They hurt you, then blamed you for bleeding. They wounded you in private and mocked your limp in public. For them, pain wasn't proof, it was a setup, and your healing became their weapon. They threw stones and pointed to your bruises, twisting your survival into evidence against you. If you cried, you were called unstable. If you grew quiet, they claimed you were hiding something. If you stood up again, they said it was all for show. Your pain was never the real issue. It was just ammunition for their narrative. Instead of asking what happened, they condemned the consequence, needing you to break just enough to justify their lies. Even in your most vulnerable moments, you showed more honesty and soul than they ever could with their fake smiles. They chopped up your story and paraded your struggle as if it proved their point. What they never expected was that you'd rise even stronger. Your scars aren't flaws. They're proof of everything you survived without becoming like them. And while you healed, they watched you obsessively, not because you were a threat, but because your existence reminded them of their guilt. Obsession isn't born from peace, but from a guilty conscience. They stalked your every move, studied your words, and tried to control your narrative because your truth was always a danger to their fiction. Every moment you thrived, it triggered their shame and exposed the lie they told. They weren't protecting anyone. They were desperate to keep you silent, terrified that the right person might hear your side. Your spiritual strength revealed their shadows, and your peace became their punishment. In the end, their obsession was the loudest confession of all. Nothing scares a guilty soul more than seeing the one they tried to break still shining and free. They wanted you erased because your integrity exposed their entire game. In a world full of masks, the one face that refuses to flinch, that won't blend in, quickly becomes the enemy. Chosen one, you weren't a threat to individuals. You were a threat to the whole system of silence and complicity everyone else silently agreed to uphold. Your truth wasn't convenient, it was raw, unshakable, and just too loud even when you weren't saying a word. Your innocence didn't fit their script, it ruined it. They weren't really searching for honesty, they were always searching for control. But you, with your grounded values, your calm stride, your refusal to bow to manipulation or intimidation, instantly became a liability in their world. You didn't betray anyone, but that's what made them most nervous, because in a nest of snakes, real loyalty looks like rebellion. Imagine a room full of performers, all carefully memorizing their lines and keeping their stories straight. Then you walk in. No acting, no pretending, just real. Suddenly, your presence alone starts to shake the whole room. Not because you called anyone out, but because you made their masks feel heavier just by being yourself. They didn't know what to do with someone who couldn't be bribed, baited, or broken. So they did what cowards always do. They tried to erase what they couldn't corrupt. You were a walking reminder of everything they were not. Every time you stood tall, they shrank inside. Every time you chose the high road, they felt the weight of their shortcuts. You never attacked them. You simply refused to join them. Your silence was a protest. Your inner peace was an act of resistance. Your integrity, it was a revolution. And here's what they'll never admit. It was never your perfection that bothered them, but your consistency. You never folded. You never flipped. You never faked it. You were simply too real for a world built on illusions, too solid in spaces designed for the hollow, too bright for rooms that lived off shadows. So they tried to exile you, to label you as too much, too intense, too honest. But innocence doesn't explain itself. It doesn't argue with liars. It doesn't beg for a seat at a table built on manipulation. It simply stands. And chosen one, you stood. Now, the very thing they tried to erase about you is the only thing people remember. They rushed to bury you because they sensed the truth was about to rise with you. People don't panic over lies. They panic when the truth is finally about to be seen. Chosen one, it was never just about ruining your name. It was about beating the clock, racing against your awakening. They saw something rising in you that terrified them, not because you were loud or vengeful, but because your light was becoming impossible to ignore. You started shifting hearts, changing the atmosphere, drawing attention everywhere you went. They knew that once people really saw you, their lies wouldn't just unravel. They'd be exposed as the ones who spun them. They didn't attack you out of pure hate. They attacked out of urgency. Your glow-up was moving too quickly, your alignment was getting too strong, your respect and influence were rising too fast. So, they did what scared people always do when truth starts breaking through. They tried to bury it under chaos. Rumors started flying. Group chats caught fire. The character assassinations began. Not because they had proof, but because they were in a panic. Imagine a house of cards trembling in the wind, and all it takes is your presence. No effort, no push, just you standing in your truth, for the whole thing to collapse. They weren't fighting you, they were fighting exposure. They were terrified that people would start asking real questions, that your genuine character would make their gossip look weak, that your steady calm would make their drama look childish, and that your truth would make every one of their lies crumble. So they had to move quickly. They had to get ahead of the narrative and discredit you before you ever got the chance to speak. Because if people paused long enough to actually listen to you, it would be game over. The attacks came fast only because your elevation was even faster. And now everything they feared is happening. You're still standing, still speaking, still shining your light. And now people are starting to see the cracks in their stories. They're beginning to ask, if this person was so bad, why are they still rising? If they were a fraud, why does everything they do feel so real? Now the truth is louder than every lie, and all their efforts to destroy you have only made people pay closer attention. What people see in you now is everything your enemies were never ready to face. You shook their world simply by breathing differently, and that's why they tried so hard to silence you. You didn't need to lift a finger to intimidate those who were terrified of becoming what they could never be. Chosen one, you never entered the room to take anything. No spotlight, no credit, no crown. You weren't competing. You were just existing, but that alone was enough to make them unravel. Your presence didn't just stand out. It exposed everything fake in the people around you. You never needed applause to feel worthy, attention to feel alive, or their approval to validate your spirit. In a world where so many build their identity on noise, Your quiet inner peace was dangerous. Confidence that doesn't need an audience is always a threat to those who only know how to perform. You didn't play their game. You didn't follow the rules of manipulation or fake laughter to fit in. That made you unpredictable, untouchable, unshakable. Imagine a world of cardboard cutouts, everyone blending in, nodding along, and then you show up, solid, soulful, unmoved. Your very breath made them nervous, not because you did anything wrong, but because you refused to dim your light for their comfort. They couldn't label you or put you in a box, couldn't understand how you stayed so real without needing anyone's permission. So, they did what scared people do when they can't control something powerful. They tried to destroy it, erase it, mute it, and mock it. But here's what they didn't count on. You weren't built for their approval. You were made to weather storms they couldn't even name. A presence like yours doesn't fade, it expands. You were never the problem. You were the reminder that their act couldn't last forever. They thought if they ignored you, you'd disappear. If they slandered you, you'd shrink. If they excluded you, you'd break. Instead, you grew louder in silence, shined deeper in isolation, and became everything they claimed you weren't. A real threat, not for what you did, but for who you were when no one was watching. That kind of power is something they'll never understand, because it can't be faked. Their lies were just diary entries in disguise, confessions masquerading as condemnation. When someone lies about you with passion, it's never exposure, it's their own projection leaking through the cracks. What they called warnings were really admissions. Every rumor they spread, every whisper they carried was never truly about you. It was always a coded message about themselves. Your name was just a mask they hid behind to cover their shame. They weren't exposing your sins, they were describing their own, reflected in your image. The beautiful part? You never had to clap back or clear the air. Your life did that for you. While they wrote scripts, you lived the truth. And here's the difference between a character and a soul. One fades, the other endures. Picture a thief yelling, "Thief!" in a crowd, trying to redirect attention. They pointed fingers at you, hoping no one would notice what was in their own hands. That's what they did. They knew what they were guilty of, but painted you as the problem so the spotlight wouldn't land on them. But projection is a fragile weapon. It needs constant maintenance. All you had to do was nothing. Just keep showing up, stay consistent, be a revelation, not a reaction. They tried to flip the script, but forgot you were the original. Now their smear campaign is unraveling, not because you shouted louder, but because truth doesn't age, it endures. Lies fall apart when there's no more energy to sustain them, and now they're exhausted from waiting for your downfall, from watching you glow, from pretending not to notice you're still standing and rising. The real ones are starting to connect the dots, noticing every accusation said more about the accuser than the accused. You became a mirror, reflecting everything they didn't want to face. Instead of facing their own flaws, they screamed at the glass. But glass doesn't lie, and neither did you. So let them keep talking. Every word they throw now only makes the trail back to their own secrets even clearer. The truth always finds its way home. They flung mud because your light looked too pure and it drove them insane. They fought with poison because your purity reminded them they were already infected. They couldn't play fair because they knew they couldn't win honestly. They twisted your words, bent your silence into suspicion, turned your calm into accusations, all because you didn't bend, break, or bite back. That was the one thing they couldn't handle. They prayed you'd retaliate so they could finally label you the villain. But you never gave them that satisfaction. You kept your hands clean while they rolled in the mud they stirred. That was the ultimate blow. Nothing hurts a manipulator more than not getting the reaction they need to complete their lie. Imagine them playing chess with knives taped to every pawn, setting traps with every move. But you simply stepped away from the board. Suddenly they're left fighting shadows, bleeding from the very traps they set. They wanted war. You brought wisdom. They wanted scandal. You brought stillness. They came at you loud, hoping you'd get loud too. But your silence became their echo chamber of guilt. And now that the dust is clearing, people are asking, why did they keep attacking someone who never fought back? Why were they so obsessed with someone who just stayed grounded? Why did they keep trying to bait someone who was never playing the same game? Your light made their dirt look darker. You didn't have to expose them. They exposed themselves by how they treated someone who never wronged them. And the best part? You stayed clean, untouched, unrattled. The glow they tried to extinguish is now brighter than ever. It's what people remember when they look back at the chaos. The one soul who never broke character. Let them throw tantrums in the shadows. You walk in truth. You shine in peace. In the end, that glow they mocked became the spotlight that revealed everything. And now, chosen one, as the dust finally settles, look around. You're still standing, still glowing, still clean in a world that tried to drag you through the mud with no proof, only fear. Let this be your reminder. You never had to defend yourself. Your consistency did it for you. The truth always outlasts the lie. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me trust you even when physical evidence is lacking. Let me believe in your perpetual presence, knowing you will never harm me. I understand that your thoughts for me are thoughts of prosperity and not harm, to give me a good future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always listening to my voice. I offer up this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am grateful for your presence in my life and the abundance you bring. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who need to hear this message. Leave a comment below about your journey and how you are preparing for your own triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work, please consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. This helps us continually improve our content to offer you the best. The link to Buy Me a Coffee is in the description. No gift is too small. Whether it's a penny, a prayer, or a share, your generosity helps spread God's word and brings hope to others. Don't stop here. Watch our next video for powerful revelations about the signs that reveal you are the chosen one. We've enjoyed following this spiritual journey with you. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Keep shining brightly and embrace your destiny with courage. See you next time. Blessings to all the beautiful souls from the Enlighten wisdom.